On a faraway planet called Selphar, the tall and powerful Thalathra lived in peaceful isolation. The Thalathra were an ancient species known for their strength and beauty, standing at least 7 feet tall. Their skin shimmered like polished stone, their eyes glowed faintly, and their voices were deep and soothing. Despite their impressive appearance, the Thalathra kept to themselves, avoiding contact with any other species in the galaxy. They believed that mingling with outsiders would weaken their race and destroy their purity. Among the Thalathra was Zerethra, one of the most respected and admired figures in her species. Her beauty was unmatched, and her wisdom was said to be equal to that of the greatest leaders in Thalathra history. She was proud of her heritage, and nothing in the universe could shake her belief that the Thalathra were the most superior race. Yet despite her power, she felt a deep loneliness that few ever saw. In her heart, she knew she would never find someone who could truly understand her. The Thalathra had never mixed with other races, and Zerethra had long given up on the idea of love. But everything began to change when a human ship landed on Selphar. The crew, a mix of diplomats and explorers, were here to establish peaceful relations with the Thalathra. Among them was Liam Donovan, a young and ambitious human diplomat who had spent his life traveling to strange planets and making contact with alien races. Liam was different from the other humans. He was not intimidated by the size or power of the Thalathra. Instead, he admired them, especially Zerethra, whose reputation had spread far and wide. As the human ship touched down on the smooth stone surface of Selphar, Liam stepped out into the sun with his heart racing. He was about to meet the most mysterious and powerful beings he had ever heard of. As Liam and his team made their way through the Thalathra city, they marveled at its beauty. The buildings were tall and made of glowing crystals, and the streets were lined with shimmering plants that looked like they were alive. Despite the beauty, there was an unsettling silence in the air. The Thalathra didn't smile or greet anyone, at least, not in the way humans did. There was no warmth in their faces. It was as if they had forgotten how to be kind or open to others. Then they met Zerethra. She stood tall among her people, her posture proud and her gaze sharp. When she walked into the room, the others in the city fell silent. The Thalathra looked at her as if she was their leader, and she held herself with the same authority. To Liam, she looked like a queen, someone who commanded respect just by her presence. Liam wasn't intimidated, though. He had met many strange and powerful beings in his career, but something about Zerethra made him feel both excited and nervous. She was unlike anyone he had ever met. An alien of extraordinary beauty, strength, and intelligence. But he also sensed something in her eyes, a loneliness, a desire for something more. Liam wasn't sure if it was real, but he felt drawn to her, as if they were connected in a way he couldn't explain. The meeting was tense. The Thalathra elders sat in their grand hall, speaking in their ancient language, while Liam and his team spoke about peace, trade, and cooperation. But all Liam could focus on was Zerethra. She was listening intently, her sharp eyes studying every word he said. Every now and then, their gazes met, and for a moment, Liam felt like the rest of the room disappeared. As the meeting came to an end, Zerethra stood and addressed the humans, her voice deep and clear. "We do not seek your friendship," she said coldly. "We are the Thalathra, and we stand alone. Your kind is welcome here, but understand this. Your presence does not change who we are." Her words were firm, but Liam could sense something else in them. She wasn't just rejecting them out of pride. There was something deeper, something personal. It made Liam more curious than ever. As they left the hall, Liam couldn't help but glance back at Zerethra. She stood tall, watching him with an expression that seemed to say, "I see you, human, but you are not welcome here." Yet, beneath the surface, Liam felt a strange connection forming. He couldn't explain it, but he knew one thing for sure. He was not going to give up. This was only the beginning of something much bigger than either of them could imagine. The days after the meeting were quiet, but Liam couldn't stop thinking about Zerethra. Every time he walked through the Thalathra city, he felt her gaze lingering on him, sharp and intense. It was as if she was watching him, studying his every move. Liam tried to focus on his mission, but the thought of her haunted him, making it difficult to concentrate on anything else. The Thalathra were an amazing species, but it was Zerethra who held his attention, even though she clearly wasn't interested in him, or any human for that matter. Liam knew that the Thalathra didn't interact with other species the way humans did. They were cold, distant, and proud. Their society was built around keeping to themselves and maintaining their purity, and they didn't mix with other races. But there was something about Zerethra that made Liam believe there was more to her than the cold exterior she showed the world. She was powerful, intelligent, and beautiful, traits that made her both intimidating and fascinating. A week after the meeting, Liam found himself walking through the streets of the city, lost in thought. The air was cool, and the ground beneath his feet was smooth and gray. The city was quiet, with few Thalathra in sight. As he turned a corner, he saw her, Zerethra. She stood alone in a garden, surrounded by tall, glowing plants. The sight of her took Liam's breath away. There she was, as magnificent as he had remembered, standing in the quiet beauty of the garden. She didn't see him at first. Liam stood still, unsure if he should approach her. It was clear that she didn't welcome human attention, but something inside him pushed him forward. This was his chance, he thought. If he could speak to her, really speak to her, maybe he could understand why she was so different from the other Thalathra. Maybe he could find a way to break through the wall she had built around herself. Taking a deep breath, Liam walked toward her. His steps were quiet, but Zerethra's sharp senses seemed to catch his presence immediately. She turned to face him, her eyes narrowing as she studied him. "You again," she said, her voice low and steady. Liam nodded, trying to remain calm. "I didn't mean to disturb you," he said, keeping his voice polite. "I just wanted to talk." Zerethra looked at him, her expression unreadable. For a moment, there was silence between them, and Liam felt the weight of her gaze. He had no idea what she was thinking, but he could tell that she was not pleased with his presence. "I don't have time for human chatter," she replied, her tone cold. "You should return to your people." Liam shook his head, refusing to give up. "I don't just want to talk about politics or trade deals. I want to understand you. You're different from the others." Zerethra's eyes flashed with surprise, but she quickly masked it. "Different? How so?" Liam took a step closer, his heart racing. "You don't act like the others. You don't seem to care about the things that matter to them. Status, power, control. You've seen something in humans that they can't see in themselves. Why?" For a moment, Zerethra was silent, her gaze never leaving Liam's face. He could see that his words had struck a chord with her. She seemed to hesitate, almost as if she were considering something. But then she spoke again, her voice softer this time. "You think you understand me?" she asked. "You think you can see past the walls I've built?" Liam nodded slowly. "I don't know you, but I can see that you're not like the others. You're lonely, aren't you?" Zerethra's eyes widened, and for a brief second, her cold demeanor cracked. But then, just as quickly, the wall returned, and her expression hardened. "Lonely," she repeated. "I am Thalathra. I do not need companionship." Liam stepped forward, but Zerethra held up a hand to stop him. "Do not presume to understand me, human. You do not know what it is like to carry the weight of an entire race on your shoulders." Liam paused, realizing he had overstepped. He took a step back, but his eyes never left hers. "I may not know what it's like to be Thalathra, but I do know what it's like to feel like an outsider, to feel like no one truly understands you." Zerethra's eyes softened for a moment, but she quickly turned away, as if ashamed of the brief crack in her armor. "You should leave," she said firmly. "There is nothing here for you." Liam felt his heart sink, but he didn't give up. "I'll be here tomorrow," he said softly. "And the day after that. I just want to talk. When you're ready." Without waiting for her response, Liam turned and walked away, leaving Zarathustra standing alone in the garden. But as he walked back to his ship, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. The ice between them hadn't melted, but it had cracked just enough for him to see that beneath her cold exterior, Zarathustra was just as lonely as he was. The days that followed were strange for Liam. Every time he returned to the Thalathra city, he couldn't shake the image of Zarathustra from his mind. Her eyes, sharp and intense, had haunted him since their last encounter. Even though she had dismissed him so quickly, there was something about her that drew him in. It wasn't just her beauty or her power. It was her loneliness, her struggle to remain detached from the world around her. But Zarathustra was not a woman who could be easily understood. Every time they met, it seemed like she pushed him away. Yet each time she did, Liam found himself more determined to break through her defenses. He couldn't explain why, but he felt a connection to her that went beyond words. She was different from the others, and he knew there was more to her story than she let on. Zarathustra, for her part, had never felt so torn. The human, Liam, was a constant presence in her thoughts. His words echoed in her mind, his daring questions about her feelings and her loneliness. It was not something she was used to. Thalathra did not open themselves up to others. They believed in their own superiority. Their isolation from the galaxy was a key part of their identity. She had been raised to think that relationships with outsiders were beneath her, even dangerous. But there was something about Liam's persistence that unsettled her. He was unlike any other human she had met. His kindness wasn't out of weakness, and his confidence wasn't arrogant. He seemed to genuinely care about her, something that no Thalathra had ever done. Every time she saw him, a strange feeling grew inside her. She knew she shouldn't care. She had a responsibility to her people, to her race, and she couldn't let one human change that. Yet the desire to speak with him, to understand him, was becoming stronger each day. One evening, after a long day of diplomatic meetings, Zarathustra found herself walking alone through the garden again. The moonlight bathed the city in a soft, ethereal glow, and the glowing plants swayed gently in the breeze. She didn't know why she was there. It wasn't like her to walk alone, especially at night. But tonight, something called to her. As she entered the garden, she saw him. Liam. He was standing near one of the glowing trees, looking up at the stars. He hadn't noticed her yet, but Zarathustra's heart skipped a beat. It was as if the universe had decided to bring them together once more. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was comfortable, unlike the tense atmosphere of their past encounters. Zarathustra could feel the weight of his gaze on her, and it made her uncomfortable in the strangest way. He finally broke the silence. "I didn't expect to see you here tonight," Liam said quietly, turning toward her with a small smile. Zarathustra took a step forward, her heart racing. "I come here often," she said, her voice softer than usual. "The night is peaceful. I need time to think." Liam nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. "I understand. I've been thinking a lot too." There was a pause, and then Liam spoke again. "Zarathustra, I know I've been persistent. I know you don't want to hear from me, but there's something about you that I can't ignore." Zarathustra's heart pounded in her chest. She couldn't believe he was saying this. She should have walked away. She should have told him to leave. But instead, she stayed silent. She didn't want to hear his words, but a part of her longed to hear them all the same. I shouldn't be doing this," Zarathustra said, her voice trembling. "It's forbidden for my people to get involved with outsiders. Our ways are clear. I have a duty to my race." "I don't care about your race, Zarathustra," Liam said, stepping closer. "I care about you. I care about what you want, not what your people expect from you." His words hit her like a wave, and for the first time, Zarathustra felt a flicker of something she had long suppressed. Desire. It wasn't just the physical attraction she had always felt toward him, but something deeper. A yearning to connect, to break free from the chains that held her back. "You're asking me to go against everything I've been taught," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm not asking you to go against anything, Liam said softly. I'm asking you to be yourself, to stop hiding. If you don't want to be with me, I'll understand. But I want you to choose for yourself, not because it's what your people want or what's expected of you. Zarathustra felt a warmth spread through her chest, something she had never felt before. It was a feeling of freedom, of possibility. She had spent her whole life living by the rules of her people, but for the first time, she realized that there could be more to life. She didn't have to be alone. She didn't have to be trapped by the expectations of others. I don't know what to do, she said, her voice shaky. I've never felt this way before. Liam reached out slowly, his hand gently brushing against hers. You don't have to know right now. Just know that you're not alone. I'm here, and I'll always be here, no matter what you choose. For the first time in a long while, Zarathustra didn't feel so alone. She wasn't sure what the future held, but in this moment, she felt a connection with Liam that she could no longer deny. She didn't know if it was love, but it was something powerful, something that could change everything. The days after that night felt like a blur to Zarathustra. She couldn't stop thinking about what Liam had said to her. His words echoed in her mind, challenging everything she had believed in. She had spent her entire life following the rules of her people, staying distant from outsiders, and upholding the purity of the Thalathra race. But now something inside her was questioning all of it. She tried to push the thoughts of Liam aside, telling herself that she was being foolish. He was just a human, a species that by all accounts was inferior to the Thalathra. They were far weaker, shorter, and less intelligent. But every time she saw him, it was as if her mind couldn't reconcile her beliefs with what her heart was telling her. Liam was different. He didn't look at her with fear or awe. He looked at her like an equal, someone worth understanding. And that was something no Thalathra had ever done. Meanwhile, Liam was growing more frustrated by the day. Every time he tried to approach Zarathustra, she pulled away. He could see the internal conflict in her eyes, and he could feel the wall she had built between them. But he didn't care. He had seen the real Zarathustra, the woman who was more than just a symbol of strength and power. Beneath the surface, she was just like him. Someone searching for meaning, for connection. He couldn't give up now. One evening, as the sun began to set over the Thalathra city, Liam stood outside the main hall, waiting for Zarathustra. He knew she had an important meeting with the elders, and he had waited until everyone else had left. He had one last chance to speak to her before she shut him out completely. As she walked out of the hall, her tall figure moving with purpose, she didn't seem to notice Liam standing nearby. But as she approached, her gaze caught his, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. The tension between them was thick, and Zarathustra seemed to hesitate. I need to talk to you, Liam said finally, his voice low but firm. I don't want to force anything on you, but I can't keep pretending that we're not connected. Zarathustra stopped in her tracks, looking at him warily. You don't understand, she said quietly. My people, my race, would never accept this. We are not meant to mix with outsiders. Liam stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. I don't care about what your people think. I care about you. About us. Zarathustra took a step back, shaking her head. You don't know what you're asking, Liam. You don't know the consequences. If I go against the traditions of the Thalathra, it will cause a rift that could destroy everything. My people won't stand for it. Liam reached out, his hand hovering just inches from hers. I'm not asking you to betray your people. I'm asking you to choose for yourself, to stop living by rules that don't make you happy. For a long moment, Zarathustra didn't respond. Her eyes searched his face, as if trying to understand why he was so persistent. She had never felt so conflicted in her life. Everything she had been taught, everything she had known, was telling her to walk away, to keep her distance from Liam. But in her heart, something was shifting. She couldn't deny the way he made her feel, the way he made her see the world differently. She had never felt so alive. "You don't understand," she said again, her voice soft but filled with uncertainty. "I've been taught that my people are above all others, that mixing with outsiders is a weakness. But when I'm with you, Liam, I don't feel weak. I feel alive." Liam smiled, his heart swelling with hope. "That's because you're not weak, Zarathra. You're strong, stronger than anyone I've ever known. And if being with you is a weakness, then I'll take it. I'll stand by you, no matter what happens." Zarathra looked away, her thoughts racing. Could she really do this? Could she break free from everything she had been taught? She had always believed that the Thalathra were the most powerful race in the galaxy, that they were meant to stand apart from everyone else. But in Liam's eyes, she saw something different. She saw someone who didn't care about her race or her title. He cared about her as a person. "I don't know if I can do this," Zarathra admitted, her voice trembling. "I don't know if I can go against everything I've been taught." Liam stepped closer, his hand gently brushing hers. "You don't have to know everything right now. You don't have to make any decisions. But I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. You don't have to carry the weight of the world alone." Zarathra's heart was racing. She had never felt so torn, so conflicted, but she knew one thing for certain. Something inside her was changing. The walls she had built up over the years were slowly starting to crumble, and with every word Liam spoke, she felt freer than she had ever felt before. "I don't know what this means," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "But I want to find out." Liam smiled, the warmth in his eyes matching the relief in his heart. For the first time since meeting her, he knew that they were finally on the same page. They didn't have all the answers yet, but that didn't matter. The journey was just beginning. The next few days were a whirlwind for Zarathra. She tried to focus on her duties, but every time she looked up, her thoughts drifted back to Liam. He had become a constant presence in her mind, even though she tried to push him away. His words, his kindness, had begun to break through the walls she had carefully built over her entire life. She had always been taught that relationships with outsiders were a weakness, but in Liam, she saw strength. He was the one person who didn't want anything from her except her trust. Zarathra's mind was a battlefield. She had always followed the rules of the Thalathra, and now she was faced with the possibility of breaking them. She knew the consequences if she chose to pursue a relationship with Liam. Her people would never accept it. They would see it as a betrayal, a weakness that could destroy the integrity of their race. But with every passing day, Zarathra found it harder to care about their expectations. All she wanted was to be free from the pressure, to find out who she truly was. Meanwhile, Liam had been patient. He knew that he couldn't force Zarathra to change her mind. He had to give her time to come to her own decision. But the waiting was hard. Every day he saw her, but she never came close. The distance between them felt like an invisible wall, one that Zarathra refused to cross. He knew she was struggling, and he respected that, but Liam wasn't about to give up on her. Not now. One evening, after a long day of meetings with other human delegates, Liam found himself walking through the Thalathra city. The sky was dark, the air cool, and the stars shone brightly above. He had come here for one reason, to find Zarathra. It was time for them to speak again, to confront the feelings they had both been avoiding for so long. As he walked through the city, he noticed a figure standing alone near the glowing trees. It was Zarathra. She was tall and regal, her posture proud, but there was something different about her tonight. She looked less distant, less cold. Liam approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. When Zarathra saw him, she didn't turn away. Instead, she met his gaze, her eyes filled with a mixture of uncertainty and hope. "You came," she said softly. Liam nodded. "I said I would. I'm not going anywhere." Zarathra took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling with the weight of her decision. She had spent so much time fighting her feelings for Liam, telling herself that it was impossible. But now, standing in front of him, She realized that she didn't want to fight it anymore. She wanted to take the risk. She wanted to take the first step into the unknown. "I don't know what I'm doing," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've never felt this way before. My people will never accept it." "I don't care what your people think," Liam replied gently. "I care about you, and I'm willing to fight for you, no matter what." Zarathra looked at him, searching his eyes for any sign of doubt. But there was none. He was serious. He truly meant what he said. And for the first time, Zarathra felt something stir inside her. Something powerful, something she couldn't ignore. It was fear, yes, but it was also excitement. A feeling that for so long she had pushed away. "I'm scared," Zarathra confessed. "I've always been scared. Scared of what might happen if I break the rules. Scared of losing everything." Liam reached out, his hand gently brushing hers. "You won't lose anything. I'll be here, no matter what happens. We'll face whatever comes together." For a long moment, Zarathra hesitated. She looked at the stars above, as if seeking guidance from the universe. The weight of her people's expectations pressed down on her. But something inside her was changing. She wasn't just a Thalathra. She was Zarathra, an individual with her own choices to make. Finally, she took a step toward Liam. "I want to try," she said, her voice firm, but soft. "I want to see where this goes. I want to know what it feels like to be with someone who sees me as more than just a symbol of my race." Liam's heart leaped with joy. He had known from the beginning that this wasn't going to be easy, but he had never expected it to feel this right. He had never met anyone like Zarathra, and he wasn't about to let her slip away. "I'm not going anywhere," he said again, this time with a smile. "We're in this together." Zarathra looked up at him, and for the first time, she didn't feel like an outsider. She felt like she belonged, like she was exactly where she needed to be. "I don't know what the future holds," Zarathra said quietly, "but I'm ready to find out." And with that, the first step into the unknown was taken. It wasn't going to be easy. They both knew that. But for the first time, Zarathra felt free to choose her own path. And with Liam by her side, she knew that they could face whatever came their way. The decision had been made. Zarathra had taken the first step, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a strange sense of peace. Being with Liam felt right, despite the consequences it could bring. But as much as she wanted to focus on the growing connection between them, there was still the shadow of her people's expectations hanging over her. The Thalathra didn't tolerate disobedience, and Zarathra knew that her actions would not go unnoticed. Liam, on the other hand, felt a growing sense of hope. He had fought for this moment, and now that it was finally here, he couldn't help but believe that they had a chance. It wasn't going to be easy, but he would stand by her no matter what. But even as he held on to that hope, a nagging feeling in the back of his mind told him that things wouldn't be as simple as they seemed. Zarathra had just begun to trust him, and he knew that there would be challenges ahead. But what he didn't expect was the trouble that would soon find them. It started one afternoon when the pair were walking through the marketplace. The Thalathra city was buzzing with activity, merchants selling their wares, children playing in the streets, and the scent of exotic foods filling the air. Liam and Zarathra were enjoying a rare moment of peace. They were just two people, walking side by side, without the weight of their responsibilities or the expectations of their people. But that peace didn't last long. As they passed a group of Thalathra warriors, their leader, a tall and imposing figure named Carrick, suddenly stepped forward and blocked their path. He was a high-ranking officer, known for his strict adherence to Thalathra law. Zarathra's heart skipped a beat. She could see the coldness in Carrick's eyes as he stared at her, his gaze sharp and accusatory. He had noticed the way she had been acting differently lately, and now it was clear that he had drawn his own conclusions. "You," Carrick said, his voice heavy with authority. "What are you doing with this human?" Zarathra stiffened, her body going rigid. She had been expecting this. She knew the consequences of her actions, and now they were here, staring her in the face. "This is none of your business, Karak," she replied, her voice firm but strained. She didn't want to cause a scene, but she could feel the tension rising between them. Karak's eyes narrowed. "You are breaking Thalathra law, Zarathra. This human is an outsider. You should not be associating with him. If you continue down this path, you will be a disgrace to our people." Liam stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "She's not a disgrace. She's making her own choices, and I'll support her no matter what." Karak sneered. "Support her? Do you think you can just come here and corrupt the Thalathra? You are nothing but a human. Your race is weak, insignificant. She is playing with fire by even speaking to you." Zarathra felt a surge of anger rise in her chest. She had been taught to keep her emotions in check, but this man's words cut deep. "You don't understand anything about us, Karak," she said, her voice growing louder. "Liam is not my enemy, and I am not your servant to control." Karak stepped closer, his intimidating presence towering over both of them. "You are a Thalathra," he hissed. "You belong to your people, not some human. If you continue this path, you will be forced to leave. You will be exiled." The words hit Zarathra like a punch to the gut. Exile was the worst punishment for a Thalathra. To be cast out from their society was to lose everything: family, status, and the very identity they had been born with. It was a fate worse than death. Liam could see the fear in Zarathra's eyes, but he also saw the fire that burned inside her. She wasn't going to let Karak's threats break her. "We won't let them control us," Liam said firmly, his voice strong. "We have the right to choose who we want to be with. You can't take that from us." Karak looked from Liam to Zarathra, his gaze cold and calculating. "We'll see how long that defiance lasts," he said before turning away. "You may have this moment, but it won't last. Thalathra law is not something you can escape." As Karak and his warriors walked away, Liam and Zarathra stood in silence, the weight of the threat hanging in the air. Zarathra's chest tightened, but she didn't back down. She had made her choice, and she wasn't going to let fear control her. "I won't let him destroy everything," Zarathra said quietly, her voice filled with determination. Liam smiled at her, his eyes filled with admiration. "I'm with you, Zarathra. Always." But deep inside, they both knew that Karak's words weren't empty threats. Their relationship was under scrutiny, and their enemies would stop at nothing to tear them apart. The path ahead would be filled with danger, and they would have to fight for every moment of happiness. But for now, all they could do was stand together and face whatever came next. The tension after Karak's threat hung over Zarathra and Liam like a storm cloud, dark and heavy. Every day, it felt as though the weight of the Thalathra laws pressed harder against them. The city, once full of warmth and freedom, now seemed like a prison. Zarathra had made her choice, but that choice wasn't without consequences. Exile. A life apart from everything she had ever known. From her people. From the only world she had ever called home. Still, every time Liam was near her, that fear seemed to fade, if only for a moment. Being with him made her feel alive in ways she had never experienced before. The bond between them was growing, and that connection gave her strength. She wasn't alone in this. She had Liam, and he had her. But Zarathra knew that standing against her people would not be easy. Karak's warning had not been an empty one. The Thalathra were proud, and they did not tolerate defiance. If she and Liam continued on this path, the consequences would be dire. A few days after the confrontation with Karak, Zarathra found herself alone in her chambers, pacing back and forth. She had received a summons from the High Council, the leaders of the Thalathra. She knew what it meant. They were going to confront her about her relationship with Liam, and they would not be kind. Liam had tried to reassure her, telling her that together they could face anything. But even he knew that this was different. This wasn't just about them anymore. It was about her people, her culture, and everything she had ever believed in. The Thalathra would never let her walk away from her duty without a fight. As the day of the meeting arrived, Zarathustra dressed in her finest robes, the traditional armor of her people, a symbol of her status and her duty. But today, it felt like a costume, a mask she had worn for too long. She was no longer the same person who had walked into the marketplace with Liam. She was someone different now, someone who had seen a world beyond the walls of her people's expectations, and that was something she couldn't forget. When she entered the council chamber, every eye turned to her. The room was silent, heavy with anticipation. The leaders of the Thalathra sat on their high platforms, their faces stern and unmoving. At the center was Elder Joreth, the eldest and most powerful of the Thalathra. He was the one who would speak for them all. Zarathustra's heart raced, but she stood tall. She had made it this far, and she wasn't going to back down now. Zarathustra. Elder Joreth's voice echoed in the chamber. You stand before us today, not as a Thalathra of honor, but as one who has betrayed our sacred laws. You have chosen to be with an outsider, a human. Zarathustra's voice was steady as she spoke. I have not betrayed anyone. I have chosen to live my life on my terms. Liam is not an enemy. He is my partner. And I will not let fear or tradition decide who I can be with. The council murmured, their eyes filled with shock and disbelief. How could she speak so boldly? How could she stand before them and claim such defiance? You have forgotten your place, Elder Joreth said, his voice cold. The Thalathra are above all other races. We are the rulers of the galaxy. Your actions threaten the very foundation of our society. Zarathustra shook her head. You think that our strength lies in our rules, our laws. But it doesn't. True strength lies in our ability to choose for ourselves, to find what makes us happy, not what keeps us locked in fear. For a moment, the chamber was silent. The elders seemed taken aback by her words. They had never heard a Thalathra speak like this before. But Zarathustra stood firm, her heart resolute. She had made her decision, and nothing was going to change that. Elder Joreth's eyes narrowed. Then you leave us no choice. You will be exiled. You will be cast out from the Thalathra for your defiance. Zarathustra's chest tightened, but she didn't flinch. She had known this was coming. Exile was the price of her freedom. It was the price she was willing to pay. I accept the consequences, she said softly. But I will not regret my choice. I choose Liam, and I choose my own path. The room was filled with murmurs of disapproval, but Zarathustra didn't care. She had made her stand, and she would not be swayed. For the first time in her life, she felt truly free. As she left the council chamber, the weight of the decision settled over her. Exile. It was a harsh punishment, but it was nothing compared to the freedom she had gained. She wasn't sure what would happen next, but she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't alone. Liam was with her, and together, they would face whatever came their way. Later that evening, Zarathustra found Liam waiting for her outside the council chamber. His eyes were filled with concern, but when he saw her face, his expression softened. They've exiled me, Zarathustra said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. But I'm not afraid. I'm free. Liam reached out and pulled her into an embrace. We'll face it together, he said softly. Wherever we go, we'll be okay, as long as we're together. And in that moment, Zarathustra knew that no matter where life took them, they would be able to face it as equals, together.